It started innocently enough, as most toxic relationships do. At first, it felt like I had found someone who truly understood me, who made me feel seen in ways no one else ever had. He was charming, attentive, and seemed to know exactly what to say to make me feel special. I thought I had hit the jackpot, but I was so caught up in the rush of emotions that I didn't notice the red flags waving all around me. It's funny how hindsight works. What seemed like small quirks or misunderstandings at the time were actually glaring warnings I ignored. And that's where my story begins. The first red flag I brushed off was his need for constant control. At first, I thought it was sweet how he wanted to know where I was or who I was with. I interpreted it as care, as concern. He would say things like, "I just worry about you," or "I want to make sure you're safe." It felt protective, like he cared about me more than anyone else ever had. But over time, those sweet concerns turned into incessant questions and demands for my time. If I didn't reply to his texts immediately, he would accuse me of not caring enough. If I made plans without consulting him first, it became a full-blown argument. I told myself it was just his way of loving deeply, but in reality, it was control disguised as care. Then there were the moments when his charm would flicker, replaced by flashes of anger. I remember the first time it happened. We were out to dinner, and a friend of mine from work came over to say hi. It was a brief, polite conversation, but the moment my friend walked away, his entire demeanor shifted. He was cold, distant, and passive-aggressive for the rest of the night. Later, he admitted he was jealous, saying, "I just don't like the way he looked at you." Instead of recognizing this as possessiveness, I thought, wow, he must really love me if he feels that strongly. That night, he apologized, showered me with affection, and promised he would work on his jealousy. I believed him. But the cycle repeated. Small disagreements turned into emotional outbursts. He had a way of twisting situations to make me feel like I was always the one in the wrong. If I brought up something that upset me, he would deflect by pointing out something I had done, making me feel guilty for even addressing my feelings. It became easier to stay quiet than to risk starting an argument. I convinced myself I was being too sensitive, that I just needed to be more patient with him. I didn't realize I was slowly losing pieces of myself to keep the peace. Looking back, one of the biggest red flags was how isolated I became. He didn't like my friends, and he made that abundantly clear. He would say things like, "I just don't think they're good for you," or "They don't really understand you like I do." Slowly but surely, I started seeing my friends less and less. It wasn't like he explicitly forbade me from seeing them, it was more subtle than that. If I made plans, he'd guilt-trip me, saying, "Oh, I guess I'll just be alone tonight." Over time, it felt easier to cancel on my friends than to deal with his reactions. The isolation crept in so slowly that I didn't even notice it happening until I looked around one day and realized I barely had anyone left. There were moments of clarity, fleeting thoughts where I questioned if this was normal, if this was what love was supposed to feel like. But every time I got close to confronting those thoughts, he would pull me back in with grand gestures and heartfelt apologies. He had a way of making me feel like I was the most important person in the world, just long enough for me to forget all the pain he caused. It was a push and pull dynamic that left me constantly second-guessing myself. Was I overreacting? Was I expecting too much? He made me doubt my own reality, my own instincts. The breaking point came on a day that started out like any other. We had planned to spend the afternoon together, but a minor disagreement escalated into a full-blown argument. This time, though, something was different. I saw it, the way he spoke to me, the way he dismissed my feelings, the way he made me feel small. For the first time, I saw the situation for what it was, toxic. I realized that no amount of love could justify the pain and confusion I felt in this relationship. Love wasn't supposed to feel like walking on eggshells. Love wasn't supposed to make me question my worth. Love wasn't supposed to hurt this much, leaving wasn't easy. The fear of being alone, the fear of starting over, and the fear of losing someone I thought I loved all held me back. But deep down, I knew I deserved better. I deserved a love that didn't come with conditions or manipulation. So, I made the hardest decision I've ever made. I walked away. The aftermath was messy. I had to rebuild my life piece by piece, reconnect with friends I had distanced myself from, and rediscover who I was outside of the relationship. There were nights when the loneliness felt unbearable, when I questioned if I had made the right choice. But with time, the fog began to lift. I started to see things clearly. I started to see myself clearly. Walking away from that toxic relationship taught me more about love, boundaries, and self-worth than anything else ever could. I learned that love should never come at the expense of your mental health or your identity. I learned that red flags should never be ignored, no matter how much you want to see the good in someone. Most importantly, I learned that I am worthy of a love that uplifts me, not one that tears me down. Now, when I look back, I don't feel anger or resentment. Instead, I feel gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons I learned, for the strength I found within myself, and for the life I've built since walking away. That relationship may have been a chapter in my story, but it didn't define the whole book. It was just the beginning of a journey toward a healthier, happier, and more authentic version of myself. To anyone who might be in a similar situation, let me say this: trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. You don't have to stay in a relationship that makes you feel less than you are. You are worthy of love, respect, and happiness. Never settle for anything less. It might be hard, and it might take time, but walking away from a toxic relationship is one of the most empowering things you can do for yourself. You deserve a love that feels like home, not a battlefield.